In bocca al lupo, and welcome to Shift+F1, a podcast about speedy race cars. That, by the way, is Italian for in the mouth of the wolf, which means good luck. I don't know how, but it does.
Why?
Good luck to F1's newest, youngest, and Italianist driver who was announced this weekend. I'm Drew Scanlon. Joining me, Danny O'Dwyer. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic. I am calling in from quite late at nighttime in Seoul, Korea, which is a beautiful place. I'm very happy to be sitting here drinking my Chupa Chups strawberry milk soda.
Oh my
God. I believe, or Chupa Chups, I believe is what Americans call it. I haven't had a taste of it yet, so I'm going to have a little taste. I'll give you a quick review.
It's usually reserved for a different podcast, but...
Yeah, it tastes exactly as you'd expect. That's my review.
That sounds great. That's not like I would expect it to taste good as hell.
Yeah, it tastes pretty good. I'm excited now. Let's podcast.
Great. Also joining us, Rob Zachney. How are you, Rob?
Well, not as good as what a few seconds ago. Danny's over there in the lamp, but they're living the future. They got all the good sodas.
My toilet gives me a shower on my butt.
Fantastic. All the things we are denied.
If you are new to this podcast, a very warm welcome to you. And if you are new to Formula One itself, we recommend listening to our preseason primer episode, which assumes no prior F1 knowledge and explains how the sport works and who everybody is. So if you'd like to go back and listen to that, it's episode 257. Also, this show would not be possible without our audience over at patreon.com/shiftf1, where every month we release an ad-free version of the podcast, along with bonus podcasts and videos exclusively for our patrons that cover racing documentaries and films, F1 video games, experiments with other racing series, and a lot of weird things. So if you would like to support the show and get access to all that fun stuff, head over to patreon.com/shiftf1 or click the link in the show notes. What's going on this month, Danny?
Last month, of course, we did Unchained, the Tour de France Netflix series made by the wonderful people who also worked on Drive to Survive. Great series, terrible names. They're consistent, if nothing else. I don't know what we're doing this month. We're going to figure it out. Maybe it'll be delicious Korean-based beverages. That's at least what I'm holding out for our Patreon-exclusive pod this month. But of course, none of this would be possible without our incredible title sponsor, It's me, Ferrario, Get Rich or Die Ryan, Agave ATX, Cyphers Training, Turf SCS, at Team Blackjack, Michael Maves, Gordy's Army, at Talking Autos, Olivia Evans, TelemetryDeck.com, FTC, Drew Stewart, Bailey Foot, Abdullah Al-Thani, Jason Chadwick, Abraham Getchell, The Space Above Us Podcast, Bunny Fiend, Snigs, Alex Goucher, Max Voltaire, Circuit Demon, Troy Stammer, William Rumpf, Irvine Clinical Research, Lachlan the Maddened Man, Samurai Love Story, and of course Jason Kelly. And I'm hoping that the walls in this Korean hotel are not particularly thin, because there's going to be some very scared and confused people otherwise. But yeah, if I hear banging on the walls, I'll let you guys know.
Yeah, it's late there for you. It's early there for me. We're all trying to keep it down.
I can feel your energy too. You have the energy of somebody who doesn't want to wake up anyone else in the house.
Yep, exactly. Well, let's get to the race, shall we? The Italian Grand Prix
Absolutely.
The craziness started before any of the sessions, actually. There was apparently a crash of the safety car during one of their tests. Rob, you noted this one. Any details on this? What happened?
Well, everyone appears to be trying to say doesn't seem like there's no way Bird Meinlander just wrecked his Aston. It looked like a super weird crash. I don't know that it looked super weird to me. It kind of looked like a routine off, but either way. Meinlander, who's been the safety car driver in F1 for ages, and a crucial thing about the F1 safety car is that, as the commentators are often at pains to point out, it looks like they're going slow as hell around the track, but to set a proper pace for F1 cars, they're actually pushing pretty hard on the sports cars that they use for the safety car. They alternate between a Mercedes GT and an Aston Martin. Context, it was the Aston that crashed, and the Aston, as F1 drivers have pointed out, also seems like it is a less capable car. But yeah, during these laps, Mylander just went off at Parabolica. The detailed description here comes from Autosport. He appeared to lose control of the Aston Martin safety car being used this weekend at the Parabolica corner. The Vantage F1 edition ran across the asphalt runoff area and then skipped across the gravel trap before plunging into the tire barriers on the outside of the track. While the incident was spectacular, with the car ending up stationary in the barriers side on, Mylander and his passenger were unhurt and climbed out of the car unaided. While there has been no explanation for the cause of the accident, the strange way that the car snaked under braking for Parabolica before spinning around suggested it could well have been caused by a mechanical problem rather than driver error. Could be.
Go. It could be, or it could be. Sometimes we don't often get to like what they don't televise the safety car doing its speed test. It's like part of the boring stuff they do before a weekend is they have to basically like get some laps in. But there is footage out there. You can see them sometimes having a bit of fun, like doing a little bit of sideways drifting action. And the first thing I thought when I saw where it happened, I was like, oh, he was like. Was he like? I've been to enough like drift shows to when they do the whole like you sort of kick out the back so you can pull it around. You know
Sure.
what I mean?
I saw cars.
I'm not saying that's exactly. I'm not saying that's what he was doing. But if I was watching any other driver in that car, that's what I would have assumed they were doing.
That article also says they refer to the passenger as the passenger, and they never describe who it is. So was Bert just trying to show off a little bit?
Oh yeah, maybe a Bella, a beautiful Bella was there, and he wanted to show off his sick drifting skills on the Parabolica.
Check this out.
The article also mentions an incident that I had never heard of in Brazil, 2002, where a car crashes. The medical car comes to assist and opens the door for the medical car driver to get out, and as he does that, another F1 car comes along and clips the door.
If I remember correctly, it was Heinz-Harald Frentzen, and it was at the bottom of the Senna S's. The medical car parked in front of the other car, and it was like my recollection of this was that it was either a red flag or Frentzen was basically at fault, that he didn't realize what was going on, and as the door opened. Okay. Was it Heidfeld?
Heidfeld was one of the cars. I don't know if he's the one that stopped or the one that...
Well, also in 2002, you had a pretty good view of the road in front of you in an F1 car, which is no longer true, but I do feel like at that point it's safety cars
going downhill as well, down the hill. Yeah, and he took out the door. The other one I can remember is Take
I'll put that in
Inoue
the show notes.
as well. Was Take Inoue getting hit by the medical car, which like twisting his knee or breaking his leg or whatever it was.
We put that in a previous one, but I'll put both of those in the show notes. Also, before qualifying, some action in Free Practice 1. Kimi Antonelli, at this time not confirmed as a Mercedes driver.
He just needed to do one more thing to impress them, just to push him over the line, you know?
That's right. He went out in a practice session, as rookies are allowed to do throughout the year. 5 laps in, crashed at Parabolica.
Yeah. Which we'll talk about it a little bit more in the news, because some of the discourse around this crash is some of the most insane spin, no pun intended, I've ever witnessed in sport. It's remarkable. But he inspired by Bert Mylander. I will say a lot of people over the weekend were like tweeting like, oh, this is because of the new surface. I don't think that that's where we're going with this. Like, the new surface was supposed to actually increase grip and deg. One of the things that they thought maybe might be contributing to some cars going off in practice was the fact that they had, because
a lot did.
Yeah, a lot did, and they do at Monza. Like, Monza is a track about marginal gains on the very few amount of corners that you can get marginal gains on. Like, there's a lot of straights here, so it's basically about throwing yourself into corners. Yeah, so this always happens at Monza anyway, regardless of if they redo the curbs or the surface. And they had redone the curbs as well, and the curbs, it seemed like, were very drivable, which is always sort of risky too, because then the drivers are maybe using a bit more curb than they'd like. But I none of the crashes I saw, to me at least, and I'm no expert, but I wasn't witnessing this like track issue, this, surface issue or anything to do with the curbs. Really, it just seemed like you're sort of, it's Monza. This is what happens at Monza.
Yeah. Colapinto, the Logan Sargent replacement driver, also went into the gravel in free practice 1, and Magnussen crashed in free practice 2. So, not the only one.
How do you think Logan Sargent feels about crashing his car at practice and getting fired, and Kimi Antonelli crashes his car in practice and gets a contract?
Listen, F1 is a ruthless sport. But the grid lines up thusly. Norris on pole, Piastri second, the first front row lockout in Monza for McLaren since 2012. Russell lines up fourth, and then Leclerc and Sainz, hometown boys in the Ferraris, line up fourth and fifth. Hamilton in sixth, unhappy with his performance, especially after his strong times in practice. Also unhappy with his performance down here in seventh place, Max Verstappen. Absolutely nowhere. The team apparently confounded by the performance of the car. Sergio Perez saying basically, this is what I've been dealing with all season, which is also some great spin. Sergio Perez will start 8th, Alex Albon 9th, and then Hulkenberg in 10th. Behind them, Fernando Alonso, Daniel Ricciardo, Kevin Magnussen, Pierre Gasly, Esteban Ocon in 15th, Tsunoda 16th, Stroll 17th. Colapinto nearly loses it on the final run in Q1. Did well not to crash. He'll start, though, in 18th place. And then the two Saubers of Bottas and Zhou. Danny, do you want to take us through the start?
Yeah, we talked a little bit last week about whether or not we were sort of misremembering any sort of, pattern when it comes to Lando Norris on starts. But for the second time in as many weeks, we witnessed another just not fantastic start in a way that it wasn't even a battle down to the first corner. Oscar Piastri had first pretty much locked in halfway down to the first turn. He was ahead of his teammate. It's the last thing any driver wants to do after putting in all that work in qualification. There was a little bit of battle behind him then, where George Russell just got way too hot in on the back of the overtaking. Oh no, it was actually behind. He was behind
Piastri,
Norris.
Yeah, Piastri kind of cut him off a little bit. Like, I don't know. I think Piastri was like doing tail gunner stuff. I think in the first, for once, I was like, I think Lando might get away with this one. Mm-hmm. Like he seemed to be have an okay start, and Piastri seemed to slot into the "I will protect you from the Mercedes." And Did he cut George Russell off? I mean, a little bit. Like Russell had to go off through turn one, through the chicane, to make the corner, and it looks like there was contact with the back of Piastri's car then. But like Norris had it right through the chicane and then through Curva Grande. The thing I can't figure out is like the second chicane.
Yeah,
Norris just didn't have anything coming down that straight, and Piastri, who, again, I thought like understood the assignment, was like, let's help Lando out. Not so much.
Yeah, it's funny. Like Piastri does a great job on the start, but even though he gets nose ahead of him, it's on the outside of turn 1 and 2, and like you basically, unless you have the inside line there, you're not getting an overtake done. The difference on the second one after, I think I forgot to mention that Russell had to go through the sort of escape road there, which, if we'll talk about F2 and F3 later, got plenty of action this weekend. But Piastri's moves around the outside on the second chicane was just, you can be either side on that one and make it work. I think Lando was a good teammate as well. He didn't push him out. If he had forced him wide there, he would have had to have given the position up. But Piastri got the move done, and it was a great overtake.
Was there contact, or did Norris just like have a shimmy? It looked like Norris almost lost the car.
Yeah,
at
do you
the
think he
apex
lost the
chicane.
rear? Yeah.
Yeah.
He did in the middle of the two.
Yeah. To me, it looked like he was just trying to not crash into Piastri and then just had a squiggle.
And then, of course, Leclerc ends up sort of taking advantage of that as well then, as they went into the Lesmos.
That's right. Yeah. So Russell rejoined the track after his escape road jaunt behind the two Ferraris. So Leclerc and Sainz got into third and fourth. And then, yeah, as you say, Danny, Norris lost some of that momentum in that corner with Piastri's overtake, and Leclerc pounced. Norris tried to squeeze him out of the grass, but Leclerc had too much speed and took second place before they got to turn 6. There's also that dust up in the background around turn 8 between Hülkenberg and Ricciardo. Ricciardo kind of moves over on Hülkenberg's and crunches his front wing, resulting in a nose change for Hülkenberg and a 5-second penalty for Ricciardo. And then apparently a further 10-second penalty for Ricciardo for failing to serve that first penalty correctly.
Wow, I didn't realize that happened. Yeah, that was a. I think Hülkenberg actually did a great job of not completely ruining the car there. It was right on the edge, and I think it's we're talking about the Red Bull seats and the Toro Rosso seats, and it's another race weekend where I just look at Daniel and I'm like, oh, I don't know, man, I don't know.
I saw some stat. The only driver who has lost more positions on the starts than Norris is Ricciardo.
Right.
Hülkenberg gets his revenge though on lap 5 by overcooking it into turn 1 and plowing into the side of Yuki Tsunoda, who then has to retire from the damage.
Yeah, I think his side pod was totally crunched, right? He battered him, yeah.
It was wild. It looked like somebody like sliced into it with like a giant pair of like scissors or something. It was pretty gnarly.
Lap 11, Perez gets by Russell with DRS into turn 1 for 7th place, and a few seconds later, Magnussen does the same thing on Ricciardo for 11th. Norris, this is lap 15, running in third, attempts now to undercut Leclerc. He pit stops before him, does a good stop, 2.2 seconds.
Good stop. Oh, wait, who does? Sorry, Leclerc or Norris? Norris does?
Norris stops first.
He does. He stops,
but
not before smashing into the pit board or whatever you call it.
On his way in, the styrofoam.
I was so convinced that he was going to get a speeding violation.
Yeah.
Like when you see someone just like billowing smoke like that as they hit the line, I was like, he's going to have the shitty start, and now he's about to get buried in this race because of pit lane. But he made it. But it was quite the fire drill. The way it came together.
I think it was a late call to pull him in. But he does a good stop, 2.2 seconds. Leclerc then pits on the following lap to try to cover it off. Both cars going from medium to hard tires, but the undercut proved very strong, and Leclerc comes out behind Norris.
Quite far behind him, actually,
yeah. Lap 18, a fateful move from Kevin Magnussen, diving up the inside of Pierre Gasly at turn 4. Magnussen locks up a little and bangs wheels with Gasly as they hit the apex, causing Gasly to go off track and cut the chicane. This earns Magnussen a 10-second penalty and, crucially, 2 penalty points on his F1 super license. And if you've been keeping track at home, that means he has amassed 12 such penalty points in a 365-day period, meaning that come next race, he will be banned from competing, depending on any appeals process. So
amazing.
Gasly is now part of that appeals process.
Yes, Gasly.
You don't need to do this, guys. It was just racing. Don't ban him on my account, which is very sweet. But my feeling is, you're right. He doesn't deserve a race ban for this incident.
No,
but I feel like a lot of latitude got taken away by the fact that he's got a lot of well-earned penalty points up to this point.
Yeah.
Which race was it? The one where he just turned himself into a massive battery?
I think it was 2 races, but one of them was definitely Miami.
Miami.
I think in that same race, he also punted Sargent into a wall.
Blocked like half the grid was stuck behind him at one stage. Yeah, this to me speaks of this happens in football and soccer a lot, where like the second yellow card is really soft, but like sorry, you just get sent off anyway. Yeah, this was a bit harsh, but this hasn't happened in a while. We pulled it up a few weeks ago, I remember, or earlier in the year.
Grosjean, I think, was the last one to get a ban.
Wow. Okay.
Oh, that totally tracks.
That
is the least surprising.
Yeah.
Who else might have picked up a ban?
Yeah. I think that was for one incident when he cartwheeled across, who was it, Alonso at Spa?
Spa. Yeah, the Spa one. Yeah. Wow.
There may have been another one. But yeah, I'm going to miss Magnussen if he's not on the grid next year. He's just this agent of chaos that was always... He's like Pastor Maldonado if Maldonado was good.
Yeah.
Although,
he's playing with the energy of an F1 multiplayer race, which I really appreciate.
Yes.
He's using your other cars as bumpers, like he did with the Gasly incident. And yeah.
So real quick though, around these pit stops, I think this is also where it starts coming clear that like the predicted strategies were both two stops. That basically it was mediums and hards. Everyone's gonna be alternating. But track position is obviously also important here, as it always is. But like because the car's running with so little wing, the DRS isn't as helpful. So like overtakes are harder to pull off unless you got a real speed advantage, just sort of naturally. But you have here, Sainz gets on the radio and he wants to keep going because he's like these cars are going to struggle to make it to the end. On whatever set they're on. He wants to extend. He's thinking one stop. Leclerc appears to be stuck with the two-stop strategy, and he gets on the radio to Ferrari and is like, why did you call me in if we were just like steering into McLaren's undercut, if we were just going to be beat that way? So Leclerc's pretty convinced that Ferrari kind of just lost him the race by basically letting McLaren undercut him and then maximizing the damage with the timing of the call. The other call I just wanted to mention here is that it's right around here where McLaren gets on the radio to Norris and tells him he is free to race, Oscar, but papaya rules are in play.
Papaya rules.
So first of all, what do we think of the term papaya rules?
I've seen some scuttlebutt around this, and some of this relates to the end of the race, and we'll talk about it all in due time, I guess. But some of the stuff that I've been hearing is the whole idea that McLaren doesn't have a number two driver, which Zach says, right? But like he says it in a way that's like, oh, is that just a platitude or whatever? Oscar Piastri's manager is Mark Webber, the least good number two driver, the least happy number two driver in the world. Multi-21, Seb. Multi-21. So you do wonder if, like, legitimately as part of Piastri's contract or something, there is something to do with he cannot, team orders are team orders, but like I wonder if they're stuck in a position where they really can't have, even in the situation McLaren are in now, where Verstappen's Red Bull is completely, it's bending over trying to get it. It's just like tenths of seconds behind them, lap after lap. Even now, they can't just say we need Lando to win this race. So, papaya rules. I don't know.
I saw an article on racefans.net with a quote from Zach Brown saying papaya rules basically just means don't crash. Don't touch.
Just say don't crash then.
You're right. Yeah. But I never considered the fact that, Piastri was a very sought after talent. And when you are sought after, you can put stuff in your contract like I am never the number two driver, Whether that actually flies, I don't know, but that's an interesting thought. Yeah, so lap 31, Leclerc getting some information from the pit wall that Norris is starting to struggle on his tires. So his engineer also says this is when Red Bull started to have graining, meaning that they expect that McLaren's tires will start to fall off here. And indeed, Norris appears to miss a corner and has to use an escape road, which shrinks the advantage that he had over Leclerc. Also on lap 31, Russell, down in 8th place, goes for a move around the outside of Perez into turn 1. He then has to bail out of it over some gravel, rejoins on the track ahead of Perez, but then gives the place back. However, he immediately starts harassing Perez again, prompting a complaint from Perez over the radio. And Rob, I'm just curious what you thought about this.
Oh, I made a note of it. Perez gets on the radio. He gives the position back, then races me. It is apparently our first time on an F1 course. It's like he's like Benjamin Buttoning, where he's just getting more and more like naive and inexperienced as his career, spirals toward what appears to be kind of an irrelevance within Red Bull. Yeah, I think it's not a good look. I think a lot of these guys are ill-served by their radio calls.
Yeah,
but yeah, stuff like that. Not an impressive moment because honestly, by the standards of these things, it was pretty in bounds. Like Russell did hand the position back, and then they come through the corner, and then Russell races him down toward the Rogia chicane. That's pretty standard. You give the position back. You don't cede any more track position than you have to. So it was kind of an absurd little whine.
Yeah. I think, the rule is something like you have to give the position back, but you can't. It's all about gaining an advantage by going off. And so you have to demonstrate that you have negated any advantage that you did gain. So if you let him pass, but then you keep up momentum still and then take him again, that would be against the rules.
But they're side by side. Yeah.
And harassing him, making him uncomfortable is not against the rules. So that's, just looked like racing to me. Lap 33, Norris pits for some new tires. Not the fastest stop at 3.3 seconds. Lap 34, Magnussen has not been deterred by his penalties, getting up the inside of Albon at turn 1 for 9th place. The Haas car is honestly looking, marginally better over the course of the season, in my opinion. Lap 38, Russell tries again on Perez, and after getting squeezed onto the grass, this time is successful in getting 8th place at turn 1. Perez tries to get it back at the next DRS zone, but Russell keeps the inside and the place. Lap 39, the other McLaren of Piastri pits, also not the fastest stop, and rejoins in 3rd, ceding the lead.
Nobody's stops are good in the second.
No.
The second stops are bad up and down the
same as last week.
The grid.
Remember?
And I'm wondering, is it because they talked about how dry it's been, and we saw when Hulkenberg had that off on lap 1, it just creates this huge cloud of dust from just being a little bit off in the grass. And I do wonder if last week you're basically on a sand dune. Here you get this dusty, dry soil being blown around the track. I do wonder if as they're running, the wheel guns or the wheels themselves are being fouled by the grid, because there it could also have been the heat. It was a very hot day at the track, which might have a even bigger contributing factor. But there did appear to be something happening with everyone's second stops, regardless of team.
Yeah, I think the commentators, or at least the Sky ones, were pointing out that, or were pointing to the heat. Metal expands, and could be, but. After rejoining in 3rd, Piastri thus cedes the lead of the race to Leclerc and 2nd place to Sainz, neither of whom have pitted and will not for the rest of the race, opting, as you said, Danny, to take track position over new tires that come with a pit stop. So
they're living by Ferrari rules.
That's right. Lap 41, Norris clears Verstappen, who's on older tires, and joins Piastri in 4th place as they chase down the Ferraris. Lap 45 is when Piastri gets the first of them, passing Sainz for 2nd as they head under the old banked track and into the Ascari chicane. which the commentators point out, we don't usually see passes there in Formula One. However, Danny, the lower formulas.
Oh my God, absolutely, yeah.
But Piastri is now 11.7 seconds from Leclerc with 8 laps to go, which is a tall order. 3 laps later, Sainz gets Norris at turn 1 with DRS for 3rd place. And in the end, Piastri can't get more than about half a second a lap on Leclerc, who is bringing humongous cheers from the crowd for the last 3 laps or so, which was so cool to hear, and wins by 2.6 seconds.
Did you hear Piastri's comments on some of the things that stopped him from getting the overtake done?
Yes.
Where he was like,
No, what did
I
he say?
needed a perfect stint. Let me tell you what I didn't need. Lance Stroll driving like it was his first karting race.
Is that what he said?
Lance
Oh my
missed the blue
God.
flag and didn't handle it well.
God.
And so Piastri's, so that's a second right there. Which probably not decisive, but just the fact that Piastri was just like, by the way, let me do a quick drive-by here on Lance Stroll.
Wow. And he's like pretty chill usually on the team radio. I feel like that's a interesting.
He's
broadside.
calm. I don't know that I get chill vibes from
Yeah.
Oscar.
Okay.
I think that quote was from after the race, but yeah. But yeah, the result from the Italian Grand Prix, Charles Leclerc, hometown hero, in first place. The other podium positions, Oscar Piastri in second, Lando Norris in third, followed by Sainz, the other Ferrari, in fourth. Hamilton gets fifth, Verstappen sixth, Russell seventh. Perez started and ended in eighth place. Albon in ninth, and Magnussen, the final points paying position, in 10th. Then we've got Alonso in 11th, followed by Colapinto in his first race for Williams. Ricciardo in 13th, Ocon in 14th, Gasly in 15th, and then Bottas, Hülkenberg, Zhou, Stroll, and the DNF of Tsunoda. And that was the Italian Grand Prix. Let us take a break, and then we'll be back with the news. All right, before we jump into the news, Rob, you did want to bring up McLaren's decision-making here.
Well, I'm of two minds about it. It was interesting. Like, if you look at the F1 like news sites right now, like there's some news, and then there's a lot of analysis of how they've handled Norris and Piastri, especially in light of the weirdness around Piastri's Hungary win. But in particular, so this was exactly the scenario we talked about for. They look to be very well positioned for the constructors fight. Like, it's approaching the point where like that is looking inevitable that they're going to overtake. But the drivers' championship is another matter. But this was exactly the kind of scenario that we're talking about that Norris really needed to get into a realistic hunt for the drivers' championship. Bad weekend from Max, and then a pole-sitting car positioned to win. That kind of goes by the boards with the first lap, and he is beaten fairly on track by Piastri, but it nearly causes an incident, and he ends up losing a position to Leclerc, crucially, and that costs him. And then you have the second decision or issue there at the end where neither McLaren's going to win. They're running 2 and 3, Norris in 3. Should they have swapped them around to give Norris, it's not a ton of points, I think it's 3 between second and third,
Right.
But should they have swapped them around to give his title hopes a little shot in the arm?
Yeah, second
and
place for
repay some of the
Piastri,
favor?
right?
Yeah, it's race wins are different. I think we
Yeah,
all agree
exactly.
on that, right? Like
Yeah,
race
yeah.
wins, taking away a win, massive. Swapping position on the podium, not a big deal. So there's a lot of folks saying McLaren should have won. There's some discourse that like McLaren should be like running these guys with a little more of an iron hand to begin with, just how they're dictating how they race. But then there's another school of thought that's like, it's fine that they let them race up front, but at least these sort of like maximize the gains for what they're racing for, at the end of the race, maybe swap the positions around there at the end. That would have been perfectly reasonable. It's kind of weird they didn't try to do it. I think to Norris's credit, in the not the post race interview, but the press conferences they do. I saw a quote from him where, he was asked about the drivers' championship, and he said they asked if he needs help, winning the drivers' championship, and he says, "I have help." They press, "Yeah, but from your teammate," and he responds, "Yeah, Oscar helps, but it's not his job to help. Like I'm not going to sit there and get on the radio and ask to be allowed to pass somebody. We're both racing." And so this is where I'm of two minds. I do kind of think that both for the interest of the Drivers' Championship and I think as a decent repayment to Lando, swapping there at the end there would have been a reasonable thing to do. But I do admire the fact that McLaren and Norris appear to have taken the attitude that, like, what happens on the track is just how it breaks down. And we are not going to be Ferrari circa 2000. We're not going to be Red Bull circa like 2000, 2010. Like this is not how we're going to run this team. And I think there's a trap with F1 media where people are very quick to be like, "Look, these dumbasses not optimizing." Mm-hmm. But it sucks when teams have two good drivers and two competitive cars and they optimize the exciting shit right out of the track, right out of the racing. And so, like, I kind of admire that they're doing it and wish more teams would, even if it does appear to be possibly about to cost Lando Norris big time.
Yeah. I feel like I guess in my heart, I like that it's happening. I think it shows a lack of, I don't know, like, I guess put it this way. When I was looking at that, I was thinking, okay, McLaren sort of understand that, like, mathematically, sure, Lando could win the championship, but, like, it's probably not going to happen. We were talking about this last week, you need Verstappen to stop getting second places. Of course, that happened this weekend, but I don't think when they went into this weekend, they were thinking that's going to happen. They knew Monza might be a difficult one for Red Bull, but, they're looking at the rest of the year and they're thinking, no, we're going to wrap this up. The Constructors' Championship's the most important thing. The Drivers' Championship's not a realistic target for us. If that was the case, they would not have their drivers fighting each other on the first lap. Because not the only reason, tire strategy was ultimately a play here, but a big reason why they were in a situation where they couldn't defend their lead was because of that. And sure, they're fighting Red Bull for the Constructors' Championship, but they're also still fighting Ferrari. Ferrari's had a decent surge over the past couple of months too, and they're not that far off them either, especially if one of the cars doesn't finish. So I'm sort of caught in two minds, because I think, like, in one way I think it would be, like, really smart for them to not really care about the Drivers' Championship, let these lads race as long as you don't crash into each other, make sure you bring home the constructor points. But in so doing, then they still need to have, like, their hands on these guys' necks and say, look, yeah, like, defend against, like, work as teammates to defend. Like, the way Sainz was basically, he didn't do much of a job because his tires were shot, but, like, he was trying to protect Leclerc's win at the end of that race. Who knows? Maybe he could have helped a bit.
Yeah, and I think they'd be much more likely to, or be much more effective in that sort of teamwork aspect if they both feel they have the respect of the team. And I feel like this is the way to get that, right? Is to say, you're both number one. You go out there and race. And the other thing is, like, as a team, I don't think the Drivers' Championship does matter. I think it is all about the constructors, because that is the payday at the end of the season, right? The difference between first and second is millions of dollars.
It's a good point too, because we know that Zach Brown's approach has been McLaren first as the brand, all the papaya shit. Like, I think you're right that both in terms of just the material outcome you get from getting the Drivers' Championship, the Constructors' Championship, and then also just, like, prioritizing, like, McLaren as a great racing brand does dovetail with what they've tried to do with the team over a period of years. And Drew, I think you made a good point there too, where you're trying to demonstrate that you respect both the drivers. I think if you take the long view that, like, I think they want to have both these drivers around for a while, and it's already a tough dynamic because they're both really good. They both appear to be easy candidates to be number one drivers at any other team. If you want to have two number one drivers, which historically doesn't work out for very, very long or very well, you probably can't, at the very first chance you sniff success, start putting your thumb on the scale. I think you're right that like they might be staying their hand a little bit because it's not just about the season. They don't want to screw this up for what they hope is going to be a period of years of successes. I think, with the rule change, that's a little iffy. We'll see how it goes. But it's an interesting, it's fascinating how they're handling this because it is so unlike how other teams have handled these moments where there's major outcomes in play and these drivers can manipulate the outcome if you can position them correctly.
Well, speaking of driver pairings, Danny, what news from the front of the driver market?
Yeah, I guess we talked about it a little bit already, but Kimi Antonelli signed for Mercedes, taking the seat vacated by Lewis Hamilton, who is, of course, going to be delighting the Tifosi, hopefully, he hopes, next year at Monza as he moves over to Ferrari. Yes, there was some, obviously this happened right after Kimi Antonelli binned his car into the wall at the Parabolica, which is quite, it was just, I don't know, it seemed like there was just something haunted on the entrance to the Parabolica, watching safety cars and rookies crash into it. A line here from Toto Wolff, as reported by Autosport: "Our new lineup is perfect to open the next chapter in our story." I should do his voice. "It is a testament to the strength of our junior program and our belief in homegrown talent." Of course, Antonelli has been sort of fast-tracked through into Mercedes, which was a big discussion earlier in the year, and they had to get an exemption for him to make sure that he had the required super license points to make it over into F1. But apparently Wolff had decided on Antonelli's promotion to the Mercedes big boy team 5 minutes after Hamilton's Ferrari move, which is quite, it didn't take too long to mourn the leaving Lewis. Autosport reported this as well. Obviously, we are discussing... Sorry, this is Wolff. Obviously, we were discussing other options and also kept the Max idea. Editor's note here. I love how they keep going on about this Max thing. Like, I'd love to know in years to come if this was ever possible, because it just seems like complete nonsense made up by Toto Wolff. But anyway, I digress.
I think Max has said that they did talk, but whether it was realistic, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe he's changing his mind now as well. I don't know. We'll have to see. We didn't discount on it completely with looking at what happened at Red Bull, but instinctively that is the lineup with these two that I've always wanted, bearing in mind the fast tracking that we did with Kimi and everything related there too. But that was immediately what I wanted to do.
What if they had gotten Verstappen, though? So they get Verstappen, Kimi's on ice for a little bit because he's, getting his feet in Formula 2. Then you've got a hotshot rookie and Max Verstappen. Do you punt George?
I think Toto does.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think because it
After
seems like he's all in on Antonelli, who, by the way, it's going to take a long time for me to promote him to Kimi in my head because, like, there's only one Kimi.
Yes.
And
he was at Monza as well.
Yeah.
He was probably having a shit,
What did we
like
think?
the good times.
What did we think, though, of the way they spun him shunting the car in practice one?
Oh my God. This was something else. The line that Wolff was reported that Wolff said was, "What he did, the car couldn't take." This guy is so fast. He's so fast that cars can't take his inputs and crash. Wow.
It's like sort of like when Neo breaks the physics of the Matrix.
Exactly.
Just like...
Not since Pastor Maldonado have we had somebody who's able to do things that cars aren't meant to do, like flip other cars Or,
Well,
uh,
and
the,
they
he-
released a ton of like speed data to
Yes.
the media to like demonstrate like we saw all we needed to of Antonelli based on this lap and a half that he ran.
Yeah, they said like, oh, he had 7 kph faster, through the Lesmos than Verstappen or something, and it's like, yeah, well, Verstappen's Red Bull was, I think, a tenth down on, or like 6/10 down on the fastest lap or something crazy. We would rather have a problem in slowing him down than making him faster, they said, which, again, I don't know if that's true. I feel like if you're teaching if you're in karting, going slow is never really the problem. I don't know. I guess it was an embarrassing look for them. They obviously wanted to show him off in front of the Italian fans. He's an Italian driver. It's a big deal for them. Just bad PR, and then trying to spin it, I thought was very silly and funny. He crashed.
You're not
in
buying
practice.
that he was just so good that he overheated the tires, and that's why he couldn't make Parabolica.
Yeah, silliness. Anyway, we'll have him next year.
Yes, we'll have next year. That leaves only 2 seats currently up in the air. The other RB seat pairing Tsunoda. Whether Ricardo stays in there or not, time will tell. Although we've mentioned before that Red Bull's Helmut Marko has said that Liam Lawson will be in a seat next year.
Yeah.
And the other is at Sauber, where apparently Bottas is leading the race for that second seat. So goes the scuttlebutt. But speaking of drivers and scuttlebutt, Rob, what's James Vowles got to say about drivers?
Maybe too much. So when people were asking why did Colapinto get the nod when you replaced Sargent, why didn't you go with like someone like, say, Mick Schumacher? Vowles gave some real talk. He said, Mick has improved a lot from where he was in Haas. There's no doubt about it. He's a competent driver that I know he had his time, but he has done incredible work with Alpine and Mercedes and with McLaren in the meantime. So the decision is, do we put Mick in the car, which I think Mick would have done a good job of, or do we invest in an individual that's part of our academy, that's done hundreds to thousands of laps in our simulator, that's driven the car, and on the data we can see from how he's performing who's making significant steps. I think both would fall into a category of good and not special. I think we have to be straightforward about this. Mick isn't special. He would just be good. So
everything was fine
what's
until
the
the
quote
last
the press
line,
ran
maybe.
with?
Yes,
Mick
exactly.
isn't special.
Yep.
Toto Wolff, and when a German is saying stuff like this, it is an indication that you probably overcooked the brutal honesty by quite a bit. I've obviously known James for many years. He's a strategist. Sometimes he says things too straightforwardly. That was a statement he could have done without. Mick has won everything there is to win from Formula 4, Formula 3, and Formula 2, and then, of course, operated in an environment with Gunther, who is brutally tough, and that was perhaps not what he needed to develop as a driver. That's why he deserved the chance. If you don't give it to him, you shouldn't comment on it. You should let everyone live. That's my opinion.
Oh,
James Vowles a week later. Redirecting. I'm not here to put Mick down. Mick is in a world championship team who have chosen him as a reserve driver, and there's good reason behind it. That is because he's an incredibly strong candidate. And the word special, I use it in the context of multiple world champions like Ayrton Senna, fundamentally, Lewis Hamilton as well. Clearly, that's a foolish thing to do because that's the comparison. Here's where Mick is. He's had a tough run of it. Well, James, we're going back to we're kind of backtracking now. He's had a tough run of it. He's made some exceptional progress, and he's in a very strong team around him. Our decision is based on the fact that we want to go with our academy and our drivers. I've apologized to Mick as well. He didn't request anything, but it's important to me because he's incredibly close to me, and it just came across entirely the wrong way. I do think there is a bit of Vowles is going to learn with F1 media that he cannot be this forthcoming, and it's going to suck because it makes him one of the most interesting voices in F1 and one of the most thoughtful team leaders. And being this honest, the content machine is going to repackage and regurgitate his words in ways that come out shitty. The original quote is actually not that bad, and it is pretty clear he is he is reserving special for a pretty. When he says Mick isn't special, he would just be good. It is clear special is not standing in for competent. It is clear special is standing in for someone of like exceptional generational ability. So it kind of sucks that he got in trouble this way. And I think over the long haul, especially as Williams begins, if Williams begins to get closer to tasting real success, he's going to become a lot more circumspect. And I think we're all going to lose by that.
Yeah, I worry as well that he might become like a surrogate Gunther. Like we don't have one, since Steiner left the grid, and Vowels has always, even in Drive to Survive a little bit, they sort of, played off on the fact that he's, a little bit quirky and whatnot.
Yeah.
Awning.
But yeah,
Awning.
exactly. But he, on the podcast and stuff, and on the YouTube videos on their channel, Williams' channel, he is like super honest and forthcoming, and that's what we like about him. So I hope that, I think you're right, Rob, and I think also like him having a rookie driver earlier this year with Sargent, obviously another one now, and also Alex Albon, who I think is actually like pretty thick-skinned and reasonable and performing well in the car. I think it maybe doesn't create the circumstances for him to put his foot in his mouth with regard to talking about his own drivers, but you could very easily see if suddenly he has one of his drivers who he has to defend, and it's difficult to do so, that he might run into that. Toto had to respond because it's Mick as part of the Mercedes reserve team, right? So he's got to say something. But I found it very interesting that he mentioned the fact that maybe Gunther Steiner was the wrong sort of mentor for him to have when he came into F1.
It's like everyone can just say it now. Like that dude kind of sucked at this, right? Yeah, like Haas thriving.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, perhaps what Mick needed was a little more time in F1 cars before he was actually signed. And it seems that F1 is trying to figure out ways to do that for younger drivers. We've got the post-season test, which will happen after the final race in Abu Dhabi this year, which they've done for many years. This test is a chance for the teams to put in some rookie drivers to get some seat time, and as well as to do tire testing for Pirelli for the following year. Let's see here. It is CEO Stefano Domenicali explaining that there's an idea on the table to add to this, to give these rookie drivers more experience, a rookie-only sprint race.
Ooh.
So if you thought there was a lot of crashing in practice, get ready for the rookie-only sprint race. It's not set in stone yet. This is just an idea. They're talking about the feasibility of it. Apparently, they're going to have more discussions at the end of September. But yeah, it would be all rookies, and it would, I guess, be a chance not only for them to get more seat time. I think this would be in addition to the current test that they do. They would actually be able to race in anger, as it were. What do you guys think of this? Danny, what do you think?
I think the first thing that the F1 teams are going to worry about is the cars getting damaged and whether or not there's some loosening of the financial regulations in case stuff breaks. But it's not even a money problem. It's also just effort with the teams and the manufacturing back at the plant. So I do think they would worry about that. I think F2 and F3, like and we'll talk about it in a second, but if you watch those races, like those cars are significantly smaller than F1 cars. And once you have an entire field of people who are not necessary, the way like we talk about it sometimes, where sometimes the worst thing you can do if you're in a situation where you might crash is be too defensive. And if sort of the whole field is tiptoeing, maybe that might create, I don't know, as a viewer, I think it's awesome, but I can see significant pushback from the teams just based on the fact that the likelihood of a crash in that scenario feels way higher than just about any other F1 race.
And everyone's going to want to be done. Like, absolutely zero. Nobody is going to be like, I want to rebuild a car after a crash in the rookie sprint. Now the season's over. Yeah. It's tough timing. I think it's kind of a goofy idea because the sport doesn't do rookies. Like, it brings them in at a glacial rate. So you'll be having a bunch of prospective rookies, but it's too late to sign anyone. So it'll be to maybe move people's stock up in advance of next season, but there's probably nothing you can show in this race that you're not going to have to demonstrate more thoroughly in Formula 2 the next year. So it's kind of a goofy little idea. I think it's neat in from the standpoint of like giving everyone a chance to sort of show what they can do in the F1 hardware, but the timing of it's weird, and it's not going to address the problem that fundamentally Formula 2 is where they're going to draft their drivers from.
Speaking of,
Yeah.
Danny.
Yeah, I almost don't want to be specific about this stuff because I think people should go watch the highlights. But Monza had F2 and F3, and it had the sprint races, and it had the 2 sprint races and 2 feature races. All 4 races are fantastic. The feature race in both Formula 2 and Formula 3 you cannot miss. They are if you don't watch the whole race, that's totally fine, especially F3. If you're going to sit down and watch a full race that was on this whole weekend, like even with the Formula 1 one, go watch the F3 race because it was the championship decider. They are short as well, exactly, yeah. The highlights are available on F1's YouTube channel. At the very least, go check that out. The F2 race was great because there was a safety car that led to a sort of driver from the back of the field rushing to the front of the field situation, sort of a Canada 2011, which was pretty great. Phoenix and the Flames. The F3 race, though, and I won't give away the result just in case, because I really think people should like pause the podcast, go to YouTube, save it, and then come back to us. Because it was the championship decider. There was 3 drivers that could have won it. Luke Browning had a sort of an outside statistical chance. Leonardo Fornaroli was the leader, and then Gabriella Mini was only a couple of points behind him. So it was a real, if Mini gets like a place or two ahead of Fornaroli, it was going to sway that way. The race it's so tense the entire way. It has an insanely brilliant ending that you have to check out. All of this, the ending's great and the result is great. All of this could have easily been spoiled by by a lot of disqualifications and penalty points that were given out after the race, that if things had gone the other way would have basically decided the championship afterwards with the stewards, which would have been awful. So they also dodged a bullet in that respect, but thankfully the result as it happened and was not affected by the penalty points anyway. So you should go check out the Formula 3 feature race highlights at the very least, or go check out the whole thing on Formula 1 TV, because it was something for the ages. Really fantastic season finale.
Cool. All right, I'll put links in the show notes to the highlights. All right, well, that's it for the news. Let's run down the standings here after Italy. Max Verstappen on top with 295 points. Lando Norris in second with 225. That is still 70 points afield. Leclerc is in third now with 192. Piastri in fourth with 179. Sainz in fifth with 172. Hamilton is in sixth with 154. Perez in seventh with 139. Russell in eighth with 122. Big gap down to Alonso in ninth with 50. Stroll in 10th with 24. Hulkenberg and Tsunoda are tied with 22. Ricardo's got 12. Gasly's got 8. Behrman still holding strong in 15th place with 6 points. Magnussen and Ocon both have 5. Alex Albon now has 4. And then Joe Bottas and Logan Sargent with 0. Logan Sargent ended his career outscored in qualifying 31-0. Constructors, Red Bull Racing is on top with 434 points. McLaren just 30 points behind in second. Ferrari's in third with 370. Mercedes is, I guess they're 34 points behind McLaren, so it's all pretty tight there. Mercedes is in fourth with 276. Aston Martin's in fifth with 74. RB is in sixth with 34. And then we've got Gene Haas and team with 27, Alpine with 13, Williams with 4, and Sauber with 0. those are the official standings. If you'd like to join the standings yourself, you can join our official Shift+F1 Fantasy League using the link in the show notes. My vocal cords have apparently not woken up yet. The podium from the Italian Grand Prix in our Fantasy League looks like this. In third place, Kim Hossable.
Nice.
Very good. Second place, Forza Formation Lap. And in first, Sergeant Pepper. But overall, the fantasy standings look like this. In third, Lead Bull Racing. In second, Mad Max Mad. And in first, The Fast of Us Part 2. If you'd like to send us an email, you can do so at shiftf1podcast@gmail.com or f1.cool/emails. You can also hit us up on the social using the link in the show notes. That is us around the internet. Danny, do you want to take us around the world?
Let's race around the world. Yeah.
The World Rally Championship, or WORK, as I like to call it, is in Greece for the Acropolis Rally.
Oh, beautiful.
Which is
love
a
it.
cool,
Absolutely love it.
cool name.
Yeah.
MotoGP is at Misano World Circuit Marco Simoncelli for the San Marino rounds. The World Superbike Championship.
Grand Prix? Just giving it to San Marino. Is this one actually in San Marino? Is Marco Simoncelli circuit actually inside of San Marino? Is this some nonsense?
The address is technically Italy.
Okay. Well, there you go. Bullshit.
The World Superbike Championship is in France at Magny-Cours.
Ooh, Magny-Cours.
We've got DTM at the Sachsenring.
Oh, my favorite ring.
NASCAR Xfinity Series is at the Atlanta Motor Speedway for the Focused Health 250. The World Rally Cross Championship, which I call Works,
Got it.
is at Pista Automóvel de Montalegre in Portugal.
Beautiful.
For the World Rally Cross of Portugal. Let's see. Gosh, a lot of stuff going on here. Motocross Grand Prix is in... Oh, man, I'm not even going to try. They're in Turkey somewhere.
Okay.
Somewhere in Turkey for the Motocross Grand Prix of Turkey. And we got NASCAR. Also at the Atlanta Motor Speedway for the Quaker State 400, available at Walmart. Just in case you need to know where to get your Quaker State.
Get your just delicious oatmeal for
That's for your engine.
Yeah, stick it in.
Well, that's what's going on this weekend. Danny, what went on this day in history?
In the past, September 4th, the Italian Grand Prix at Monza today in 2005, won by McLaren's Juan Pablo Montoya, and this is, I cannot believe this is a true fact. I read this 4 times just to make sure. Was only the second time in F1 history that all the cars that started the race were still running at the end.
In 2005?
In 2005. You think about all those years. I feel like that was like a 10x multiplier between now and then. That's crazy to me. The only other occasion was the Dutch Grand Prix in 1961.
That's crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
Well, it's also not crazy because during COVID, I went back and watched a lot of old races. Dude, like flies. They're just
so
dropping
the other
all
day,
over the place.
YouTube served me up. Do you want to watch the 1998 Belgian Grand Prix with modern F1 graphics?
Oh my god!
And I was like, "Do I?" And that, of course, is the one with the lap one wipeout, the Coulthard causes, half the field is gone, but they hop in their spare cars. But it was hypnotic because for me that's very nostalgic. This is the F1 I grew up on, so I'm just zoning out watching it. But also, yes, after the initial crashes, every few laps, like somebody just retires from the race. Like cars just give up the ghost. And this was an era where I remember being pretty reliable. And it's like night and day compared to now, where it's like something has to happen to knock out a car or like a major, like a power unit fail. But like here, it's just people are just like, well, this is done. No more.
Wild. Absolutely mad. One of those finishers was Italian Giancarlo Fisichella, who finished third behind Montoya in first and Renault teammate Fernando Alonso in second. Fizzy dedicated his podium to former F1 driver and fellow Italian Michele Alboreto, who had been killed testing an Audi car in April 2001. Fizzy said, "I know Alberto was the last Italian on the podium at Monza before me. I was lucky enough to race together with him in touring cars, and he was a great person, really special. I want to dedicate the result to his memory." Which is fitting, I guess, considering we now once again have an Italian on the grid in
there you go.
Kimi Antonelli. So there you go.
All right. Well, final thoughts after the Italian Grand Prix, Danny.
It seems I mean, we talked before about how the first four races of this season, and it felt like it was swinging one way, and I don't know. F1 is a sport that you sort of have to hold on to the version that you think is going to happen, because it might be not very exciting. So you're like, okay, well, look, the next 6 months are going to be this way, but every race might be interesting. And, you know, we're not used to like fundamental change happening in a weekend. Sometimes we go years where things are very similar, or one team is very dominant, as we have had with Red Bull. I do think this is a particularly bad blip for them, but maybe it's not. Like, what's going on with this Red Bull? They seem to be sort of panic trying to fix the car a bit. Like, they had some weird aero stuff on this weekend to try and maybe fix some of the issues they were running with, and it just seemed to make things worse. Like, is there panic stations there at the moment? Like, this was a bad weekend. And so now I'm at the point where I really can't tell week on, week off, which version of Red Bull is going to turn up, which version of McLaren, even which version of Ferrari. I don't think any of us would have guessed that Leclerc would have come out with the win after practice this weekend. So it's exciting. I don't know what's going on. And if we have some boring races that come up, that's fine. But it just seems like more and more, even though we've been doing this podcast for years and I've been watching F1 for a long time, I don't know what's happening anymore, man. There's a lot of variability this season.
I think to that point, just best season in years in a lot of ways. Maybe better than 21 because, well, 21 is kind of soured at the end. But really, when is the last time you had a season where it feels like there's four teams that can turn up with a race-winning car? Not the same four teams at every track, but like on a given weekend, like it feels like three teams might be in play for a race win, and then across a few races, four teams are in play for a race win. Yeah. And let's face it, like historically, F1 has been about Grand Prix victories. That is how, when we go back to, like, you know, before the Schumacher era with much more variance in how things work out, the measure of an F1 driver was race wins, not really championships to anywhere near the same extent. Yeah. It is how many times did your car end up, victory lane? How many times were you at the top of the podium? And it's made a riveting season. Like, I'm curious who's going to win the Drivers' Championship and how the Constructors' Championship is going to play out. But it's a much healthier place to be with the sport if you can be super invested in a race like Monza, because you just do not know who is going to win this one. And does this mean Ferrari's did it advance Ferrari's hopes of winning either of these championships? A bit, but like there's still kind of long shots for them. Doesn't matter. Seeing Leclerc do that, seeing him get this win is meaningful in a way that, like, even a shootout between two teams for like who's going to win the championship at the end is not necessarily the most exciting on a race by race basis. It accumulates. Last thing before we go, IndyCar Minute. Did you all catch what happened this weekend?
No. Where was it?
So they went back to the Milwaukee Mile, which is a hilarious facility. Basically dates back to the start of motor racing.
Facility?
Which started in like 1916 or something like that. Very early racetrack. It's basically in a neighborhood. Like, you look over the fencing, you're looking at people's houses. Like, I can't. That's
like Interlagos.
They're thrilled the Milwaukee Mile is back. But
yeah, anyone who has like children, like infant children, is moving out for the weekend.
But so Alex Palou has been kind of a lock to win this IndyCar season yet again. You know, he's the best driver on the grid. He's been really consistent. So we came into this weekend, which was a doubleheader with a huge points win. Like, he did not even need to do particularly well to put this thing on ice. Race 2 of the doubleheader, his nearest competitor is Will Power, who crucially won the previous race, the last road race at Portland, placed decently in the first leg of the doubleheader. Second part of the doubleheader, track rolls, the field rolls out information lap. Pallou's car doesn't start.
Oh, wow.
And again, he has a huge lead, but they also give huge amounts of points in IndyCar. Basically, the only way that like you could have changed the championship outlook is if Palou doesn't get any points somehow in a race. And since he avoids every crash, the odds of him DNFing were pretty low. His car won't start. They race it down to pit lane. It takes them like 15, 20 minutes to get him out on the track, 28 laps down. They basically put him out there just so that you can pick up the pieces, because you do get some points for like racing a certain number of laps, basically in IndyCar. Like, just there is some damage control points you can pick up. Meanwhile, Will Power is in the lead or in second place. Like, he's battling for the lead, and they're updating as they run. Palou went from being like 50 points ahead at the start of the race to like, 30 laps in, he was going to be like in second place in the championship by like 8 points. Just because of the damage of this. Yeah, it was going to swing the entire championship. But then on a restart, with no help from anyone, Will Power just spins the car.
Oh, no.
Wow.
And goes he loses the lead lap because of this. He barely keeps it out of the wall. He nearly DNF'd. Like, he loses it hard, goes like spiraling toward the wall, manages to like do some black magic with the brakes and the gas to like keep it out of the wall. But he's out of contention for the win. He manages damage control. I think he gets it up to 10th. So now they got one race left. The Big Machine Music City Grand Prix. Sorry, they don't say Grand Prix in IndyCar. Grand Prix in IndyCar. Because crucially, they are not running the Nashville street track they used to run, which would have been an amazing place to finish this, because that's a demo derby. Instead, they're running an oval race because they're doing like road work in Nashville. They're not going to access that track for a couple of years. So they're doing an oval race. But it is Palou now still has the lead. It's sizable, but like could easily be wiped out with a race result. So IndyCar has, against all odds, converged to just about a winner-take-all scenario for the end of their season. All because Palou's car... Oh, this was the really brutal part. So why wouldn't his car start? They couldn't figure it out. Hybrid system was working. Starter system was working. The 12-volt battery on the starter. That was it.
No.
The battery is flat. Just a bad 12
boy.
volt.
Whose job was that?
I can't... Little 12-volt battery.
That's crazy. Man, I'm surprised those cars just have little starters like that. They can't just replace the wheel and it fixes the ignition or something.
So somebody got in trouble because he used the hybrid system to sort of like start his car on the track, and they're not allowed to do that. And he was like, why not? Why do we have the hybrid if we can't use it to juice the car up to speed? So like, I do wonder if he'd just been like, fuck it, and used the hybrid and just circumvented the usual starter system if he could have gone. But apparently they still do force you to use their typical starter system, even though I guess the hybrid does have some capacity to throw the car into gear.
Wow. IndyCar, always wild. All right, well, thanks folks for hanging in there. Danny, Rob.
I'm going to bed now. It's midnight in Seoul.
Yes, if you'd like to support the show and get access to all of our bonus episodes, the ad-free version of the podcast, and the official Shift+F1 Discord, you can do so over at patreon.com/ShiftF1. Have a good race weekend, everyone. We will see you all next week.
Meow.